Hello viewers, welcome to another interesting subject, that is digital communication. I am Professor Orithro De. This lecture is totally conducted by Ganon, powered by Wishback. In my last lecture, what we discussed? We discussed the delta modulation. As I told you earlier that it is not a game. It is one kind of the modulation, that means transmit and the reception of a signal. Now there are some issues with the delta modulation. Before starting the adaptive delta modulation, let us have a recap of delta modulation. An input signal xt is delta modulated to another signal ut by two levels. What are they? They are either plus delta or minus delta. Now this xt and ut is compared. If the difference is positive, that means more, then the signal is increased by one step, that is delta. And if the difference is negative, then the signal is reduced by one step, that means minus delta. There are some issues. They are slope overload distortion and the granular noise. This kind of the problem can be overcome by using adaptive delta modulation. What do you mean by adaptive? Adaptive means there is something better, something good. So this kind of the modulation, that means adaptive delta modulation, is considered to overcome the difficulties in delta modulation. In this case, the logic for step size control is added in the diagram. The step size is increased or decreased according to the specific rule depending on 1-bit quantizer output. For an example, if 1-bit quantizer output is high, that is logic 1, then step size may be doubled for the next sample to continue with the message signal. If 1-bit quantizer output is low, then step size may be reduced by one step. Then what is the mathematical representation of the adaptive delta modulation? Here, error E nts is equal to x nts minus x cap nts. What is this ts? Ts is a sampling period. Xt is a message signal and x cap t is a approximation of the message signal. The output is generated by the 1-bit quantizer, which is controlled by logic for step size control block. And unts is equal to un minus 1 ts plus delta. That means unts is generated according to the step size delta. And what is a un minus ts? It is just a delay of unts. Un minus ts is generated by a delta in uts. This is a transmitter block. Now let us discuss receiver block. The receiver has two portions. The first portion produces the step size from each incoming bit. Exactly the same process is followed as in the transmitter. The previous input and present input decide the step size. It is then applied to the second portion, that is an accumulator, which builds up staircase waveform. The low pass filter then smoothens out the staircase waveform to reconstruct the original signal. Now let us discuss the waveform of the adaptive delta modulation. In the shown figure, if the signal is increased sharply, then the step size delta 2 is greater than delta 1 to follow the signal. Else, delta 2 is less than delta 1. The quantized sequence will be 1 1 1 1, then 5 0 1 0 1 0. Then what is the difference between the delta modulation and adaptive delta modulation? In delta modulation, the step size cannot be varied. It remains constant for the entire signal. However, in case of adaptive delta modulation or ADM, the step size can be varied according to the variation of the signal. In delta modulation, slope overload distortion and the granular noise can be present, but in adaptive delta modulation, only the quantization noise is present. The other types of the error are mainly avoided. The modulation utilizes the bandwidth a lot more efficiently as compared to that of delta modulation. It has wider dynamic range than delta modulation. What is the advantage of this delta modulation? This modulation can be used to reduce the slope error which is present in delta modulation. This can be used to remove the granular noise from the signal. It has an improved signal to noise ratio or SNR as compared to that of the delta modulation. Adaptive delta modulation has a low pass filter that can be used to remove the quantization noise. It has higher dynamic range as compared to delta modulation. There is no need to error detection in the case of adaptive delta modulation. What is the application of this delta modulation? It is effectively used in audio communication. It can be used in systems that require improved voice quality. It is used in voice coding. It is used in television signal transmission. The secret line of Motorola used 12 kilobit per second adaptive delta modulation. It is used by NASA for different communication between the spacecraft and mission control. The US Army also uses adaptive delta modulation in order to conserve bandwidth over various tactical links. Then what we have discussed today? We have discussed adaptive delta modulation concept, then transmitter of the adaptive delta modulation. After that we discussed receiver of the adaptive delta modulation. Then we discussed the difference between the delta modulation and adaptive delta modulation. Then we discussed advantage and the application of the adaptive delta modulation. That's all for this segment. Stay safe, stay healthy and stay connected with Ganon. Thank you viewers. Bye.